Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here today. Many of you probably already know my name. I'm Kelsey. I use they, them pronouns. I work at Philanthropy together as the program and campaign manager. Just a few housekeeping things before we start. There is closed captioning, which you can enable in the bottom of your screen. I am calling in from Pawtucket and Massachusetts land, aka Boston, Massachusetts. I am unbelievably excited to be hosting this session with a very good friend of mine, Maritza, and an amazing colleague, Sasha. They're going to be introducing themselves a bit later today. A few other things about this session. We will be facilitating it emergently and reacting in real time. So we are asking all of you to please come ready to just learn with us. This is going to be a very experiential based session. We want to see you in the chat, put on your video, get ready for breakouts. It's coming. And the reason why we put on Trust in Me is because we are wanting all of you to put some trust in each other. We're going to get a little vulnerable today. And with that, I'm going to just jump into a short story of abundance. And if you see me looking over here at any point, it's because I have notes on my screen over here. So I'm going to do my best to constantly reorient back to the camera, but just know that if I'm looking over here, that's why. So for me, I am vegetarian, and for a very long time, whenever I was at community events with food and was offered food, I was always like, oh my God, I'm vegetarian. I need to take all of the food on my plate to make sure that I have enough food to eat, just in case like all of the vegetarian options are gone once everybody eats, right? Very scarcity-based mindset, very stressful, constantly like fixating, where am I in the line? What's going on with the food? What's going on? And as time moved on, what I started to see is more and more organizers realized that people with dietary restrictions and people with allergies really should be going up first in the line. And that completely shifted my experience within the spaces I was moving, right? I started taking less food, not more than I needed, which I often did before we had those pieces. And when I started to shift to a mindset of taking what I needed, taking what was enough, versus taking as much as I thought just to prepare for crisis, what I realized is there is enough in the world for all of us. And so as we start this session, I just want to remind everybody to think about this. In a world that pushes us towards individualism, scarcity, and competition, it is truly a revolutionary act to move with abundance, rooted in community care and mutualism. So sit with that. And now I'm going to invite you all to a meditation. So first, let's take a moment to arrive. If you didn't get some water, take a sip. If you're hot, take off your jacket, maybe stretch a little bit, get comfy in your chair, make sure you're seated in a way. I encourage you to scroll through the folks in the room, maybe turn off your camera. You don't have to. Scroll through the names. I'm sure you're going to see familiar faces, familiar names. I'm seeing a few. It's making me feel really happy. We're in this digital space together, but that doesn't mean we're not, in community and connected over the digital highways. And so now that you've all had a moment to arrive, I want you to, if you're seated, feel your butt in your seat, your back against your chair. Take a few deep breaths. If you're standing, maybe rock side to side on your feet. Feel the weight shifting from one leg to another. Big inhale in. Big exhale out. And so now I'm going to be offering a few prompts. I want you all to think about the word money. What images come to mind? What feelings, sensations, memories? When was the first time you learned what money was? What are some key moments in your life with money? Take a minute to sit with that. Are you feeling tension in your body? Where is that tension? What does it feel like? Are there smells, tastes, sounds, maybe even images? Inhale in, exhale out. Now, I want you to think about enoughness. It can be enough money, it could be enough food, enough shelter, enough clothing, enough fun things to do. What does enough feel like? What does it look like? And when I say enough, I want to remind folks and encourage folks, we want to, what is a plate full that can feed us for one meal, where we'll clean the plate, there won't be anything left over, and our hunger will be satiated. Enough. Not like me at the beginning that I was sharing that story where I was taking all of those extra foods because I was afraid that I didn't have enough. Enough. Inhale in and exhale out. Now, I want you to shift your memories and your thoughts to a moment of sharing resources. Think about a time that you shared a resource. Maybe it was giving a grant with your giving circle. Maybe it was offering your guest bedroom or your couch to a friend. Maybe it was volunteering time. What did that feel like? What did it smell like? How does it feel now when you reflect on that? Is there a particular memory that comes to mind for you? Where does that memory live in your body? And again, I want you to take a nice big breath in and exhale. We've moved from thinking about money to enoughness to resource sharing. And I would love, if you feel comfortable, for y'all to share in the chat, what are some of the things that you're sitting with, thinking about? Take your time. You can come out of this meditation slowly. If you closed your eyes, maybe you open your eyes. Maybe you even take a few moments to write down words in a journal, on a piece of paper. Was there anything that you learned from traveling through those pieces? And as you slowly start to come out of this meditation, I want to talk a little bit about why I situated those prompts in that way. When I first reflect on money, for me, I feel it in my chest. Often there's a tightness. I feel my mind race. How do I make sure I'm paying bills on time? Do I have enough for the deposit on the next place I'm moving to? Will we be able to afford rent at the next place we're moving to? Lots of individual, micro, centered here in the small, in the head moments. When I shift to thinking about enoughness, it shifts to Well, I have support of my community. That's what enoughness is for me. I know if I am in a moment of crisis, I have folks in my circle I can call, one of whom is in the call right now. Shout out to you, Maritza. It's macro, it's community. And when I think of resource sharing, for me, it's transformative. It's creating a future where all of us have housing and security in our homes, where we're able to access gender-affirming reproductive health care, where our earth is happy and biodiversity is strong, where we have what we need, not only to survive, but to thrive. And I want to restate the sentence that I said at the beginning. In a world that pushes us towards individualism, scarcity, and competition, it is truly a revolutionary act to move with abundance, rooted in community care and mutualism. And that is why today we're going to talk about money stories and about our giving stories, so that way we can move through the world with community care and mutualism and the understanding that we are all interconnected. Because at the end of the day, what we all have is each other. And so I'm just going to share some of the things I'm seeing in the chat. Please feel free to continue sharing. So we're feeling some money in our belly, and when we shift to enough, it feels expansive. Yes, I love that. I love the word expansive. We're seeing shifting from anxiety to peace to total happiness to the feeling of abundance. I love it. And with that, speaking the love language. I love it. I love speaking people's love languages. I'm also, very into meditation. And I think this is a great way, like a big part of our practice today will be that embodiment feeling, because remember at this moment, when you're feeling those anxieties, when you're feeling all of these emotions, this is what the people you're going to be talking with are feeling. And so with that, I'm going to be passing it over to my colleague, Sasha, to share a video with you all. Take it away, Sasha.
Thanks so much, Kelsey, and hi, everyone. And I want to name that, like, for some of you, this might be your love language. And for others of you, you might be like, what just happened? That is not my jam. I feel disconnected, or I don't feel anxious. What's the big deal, right? So I want to name that might be in the room too. And I invite you to engage today from the place that feels approachable and reachable for you, right? So if you're like fully there, this is your love language, this is where you feel like home, go there. And if you're like, this is a little scary, dip your toe in and think about how else you can be engaging. Because one of the things we're trying to do today is to explore how we can have conversations about money in our lives in a broader context as a tool for making change, for giving, for transformation. So we started in like a really embodied, in your seat, where you are kind of way. And one of the things that we want to do here is bring in a multiplicity of stories and voices. So one of the things that we asked, and let me actually introduce myself. Hi, I'm Sasha Raskin-Yin. I'm the interim executive director of Amplifier. Amplifier works to strengthen the Jewish Giving Circle network and to create all sorts of on-ramps for conversations about how and why we give. We do that rooted in Jewish values, so you'll get a bit of that. But we love this sort of like, how do we talk about giving? We think it's absolutely necessary to transform the world we're in. And so that's why we're really excited about this workshop. And right, I know that my story is just my story. So we asked some of our friends to join us and share some of their stories as well. So I'm going to share a little video for you, for those who are like, why can't this just be a panel conversation? This might be a little more accessible. And then we'll tell you a bit more about who the presenters are for this session. So I'm going to share my screen. There's going to be a video. It's about 2 minutes long. and then you'll hear my voice again.
I have various thoughts on money, but I think that what I know for sure is usually talking about money makes me feel anxious.
My tip to talk about money is that you need to do some research and understand your playground. For example, in Latin America, you need to be aware of the colonial history, philanthropy and religion, context for the civic and financial education people get.
I grew up as a middle-class kid on Long Island in New York, and we didn't really talk about money that much. Growing up, though, there was definitely a sense of needing and the importance of making the world a better place.
In my family's culture, when I think about giving, there was always an approach of giving from the heart and making sure that things were done, find a way or make a way. So that was always my approach to giving, still to this day.
It's so great to learn what people are interested and passionate about. And if I know that asking and talking about money is going to help them express that in the world, that's exciting.
Understanding that philanthropy is the love of humankind, and giving, as my family always has done, is what is necessary to make the world better. I think that's why I feel the way I feel about giving to my community.
Okay, so a quick, short and sweet video. And now what Maritza, Kelsey, and I are going to do is we're going to share our own money stories with you as just an example. What might it look like to talk about your own history with money? So we'll probably all take different approaches to this. And that's fine. We're going to talk for about 2 minutes each. So like I said, hi, my name is Sasha. I come from a very small, rapidly upwardly mobile immigrant family. My folks are from the former Soviet Union, from Moscow. I was the first in my family born in the US, and my family, all of my grandparents were only children, and my mom has a brother, but so it was tiny, 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 and we were all in New Jersey. My family when I was born, my family was already upper middle class. They were entering the professional upper middle class. They owned their home and were making 2 solid salaries, paying off college loans and helping their parents. Like I said, I grew up in suburban New Jersey, and I learned that money was for spending and living the life you wanted. Money was there to have fun, to use it, to do what you wanted to do with it. My mom donated when friends or local neighborhoods asked, and when there was a crisis, but it was never really a priority or a big part of the conversation. Supporting family members like grandparents and my uncle was a basic requirement, and so it didn't fall in the same category, right? It was just an expectation that money was like a family resource for the entire family. I feel like I learned about giving from the WNYC pledge drive. That's mostly how I learned about giving. And it wasn't until college that I internalized the practice of trying to downplay or hide class privilege, which was a big thing at my college, or that saving could be an important priority too, which I learned when my mom kind of mentioned casually that they hadn't been saving enough for retirement, but that would be totally fine. And this is kind of how we talked about money. We talked about it casually, mostly in passing, and with the privilege of not really having to worry about it too much. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to pass it to Kelsey to share their story.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was such a beautiful, detailed story. So also, y'all will probably notice I have this, you might see this, it's one of my fidgets. It helps me stay focused. So if it's distracting, I'm very sorry. So for me, I grew up in a single parent household in Lowell, Massachusetts. My dad essentially was what I would describe as newly middle class. His dad worked and frankly died in the Pittsburgh steel mills. And he moved up to Boston to be a non-traditional student and worked as an engineer. Now, I watched my dad jump from being an engineer to a bus mechanic to a janitor to being back to an engineer. So as you can see, there was a lot of movement for us One of my most vivid memories was early on during the recession. My dad had gotten laid off, and he looked at me and said, well, we have nothing to do today. Do you want to go to the mall and do window shopping? Because we weren't able to buy anything. And so, that was a moment for me where it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that's what we're going to do. And then another key moment for me when it came to money was I was a part of a summer and after school program that serviced youth across Lowell. Many of the youth that came to this program were under-resourced and or were coming from single parent households because it had a great scholarship program, which I didn't learn until later. But I remember being at one of the fundraisers, and one of the donors had asked me where I was from. And when I said Lowell, she just stopped talking to me because Lowell had a reputation of being a city where, it was the rough side of the tracks, to name a cliche. But through all of that, my dad always stressed the importance of giving. He constantly had like a tally of all of his donations and tried to outdo himself every year, while also simultaneously stressing, like, you have to take care of yourself. You have to build your safety net. You have to, make sure that you have that because nobody else will do it for you. So when I started to step into my adulthood and activism, I felt tons of freaking anxiety. Am I going to have enough to retire? I'm an only child. What happens if my dad gets sick and I have to pay for his medical care? How will I do that? What will I do? Tons of anxiety. And that, combined with really needing to feel like I was making the right choice in where I gave, actually made me pause in my giving for almost, honestly, 3 years. I had list after list about this organization, that organization, why, when. And it really wasn't until I started stepping into this framework of trust and solidarity with my community that I realized my community is going to have my back, but I need to have them first. And so I started getting knees deep into budgeting and knowing, how my money was moving. And from there, I personally try to make a commitment of at least 1% of my income on any given year. So that way it's tied to when my income goes up and when my income goes down, because that does happen. So again, moving from very scarce to very this is an important part of my activist practice. And it's critical, particularly as a white person who's been able to access spaces, to ensure that I'm donating, particularly to Indigenous groups and groups specifically supporting Black community members where I live now in Boston. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my friend Maritza.
Thanks, Kelsey. Hi, everybody. I'm Maritza Grooms. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Associate Director of Community Relations at Cambridge Community Television, and that actually is going to be relevant to this conversation when talking about money, because I'm in an industry right now that is very, very much tied to whoever's in office, the FCC, franchise funds, and this whole idea of cable and cord cutting, which is a whole different thing. But we talk about moving from a scarcity mindset and the idea that our funding could just fall from under us at any time to an abundance mindset all the time. We're having these conversations now. But in my own life, I grew up, I was born in Lowell, and I was born on that rough side of the tracks, going from powdered milk and EBT, and having no idea. And I didn't know that there was shame associated with even that and being a low income person until I was much older, and kids, kind of are mean sometimes when you're a kid, but you don't know, so I didn't care. I just knew that I had enough. I knew that there was always food on my table. There's always clothes on my back. And that's how I was taught to see the world. And we didn't talk about money in the sense of where the money came from. I never saw a budget, but I did learn how to pick out which groceries were where I would get the best for my buck, and, not being ashamed of wearing Payless shoes, and, getting your clothes from a secondhand store or hand-me-downs, right? Those things were not, though you were appreciative. Beggars can't be choosers is what I heard a lot growing up in life. But as you get older and you're a young professional emerging into the world, and you've been taught that what you give is from your heart, you give time, you give your energy, not necessarily money, because I also was taught to have a very negative view of folks who ask for money, which has shifted greatly in my life, being a person who lived paycheck to paycheck for a little while. Yes, a lot of hand-me-downs. That powdered milk, oh, never again. But you shift your mindset when you are the person who needs the money, right? And then I also worked at that same nonprofit organization that served youth in Lowell. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting and weird about that organization was that they required staff to donate from their check to the organization, or to United Way, which was one of our funders. And I also had to facilitate financial literacy workshops at the same time that I was learning how to manage my own finances. So I was learning right there with those young girls, and I was still donating my time, but I didn't start really feeling comfortable talking about money really until I met Kelsey. And we would have very open and honest conversations about what giving looks like for different types of people. And bringing that all back around to what I'm doing now at my job, and how we view donations, and how we're shifting even how we view like large donors, where anybody who gives money or gives anything, because sometimes culturally, maybe you're giving food, maybe you can't give money, maybe you can, make something with your hands, right? So when thinking about giving, I always just thought about, what do I have that I can give? Because I know what it's like to not have. And uplifting all contributions at my organization. So if you give $10, I know what it's like, because I've been that person who that $10 determined whether or not I ate lunch that week, but I would give it if I had it. And there was a time where I also, there was, when I'm now into my abundance, right, because of my professional growth. And I just want to say this one last thing before we give y'all an opportunity to have these conversations in small groups. I see it now where folks are donating to me as a Black woman in the community who is very outspoken about social justice or social injustice and inequities in our community. People have started donating to my Venmo and Cash App, and I redistribute those funds because I do have enough now. I have a surplus, I have that abundance, and I give, and I'm very picky about where I give because I want to make sure that it's going to the right people. So with that said, I would love for you all to reflect on these stories that we've all shared for you. And you're going to get an opportunity. We talked about maybe it could be a little anxiety driven to have these conversations, but we're getting a little bit vulnerable with you, and we're going to invite you to get vulnerable with each other. We're going to break you out into groups of 3 or 4, and we're going to ask, what did you learn about money and giving growing up? What do you want to take with you, and what do you want to leave behind?
Welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome.
I hope
Just give a couple of minutes for folks to get reoriented to the space, or a few seconds anyways.
Everyone's gonna whoosh back in here in 2 seconds.
Yes, awesome. Well, let's all collectively take a breath, because you all just did it. You all just had conversations about money, and that is amazing. Congratulations. Whether you felt anxious, whether you were excited, whatever you were going in there with, you did it. So that's the first step. Okay, you did it. And we would love to hear in the chat some things that y'all learned in this experience and what you're going to bring forward. So feel free to drop that in the chat. anybody, if you feel comfortable sharing, of course. That's the other big piece of this. And I do want to remind y'all, you will be getting tangible tips. You're not just going to be hearing us talk about our feelings, but you will get actual tips. Yes, learning that your family doesn't talk about supporting other family members, but loving to talk about philanthropy. That's something important to keep in mind, right? When you're having these conversations, because that's part of that. Where did it come from in your family? Where do those feelings and thoughts and values come from around money, and how you treat each other and support each other in community, right? Discussing the complexity of changing our class status and how our money situation has changed since we were kids. Yes, I feel that deeply. I feel that deeply. Definitely talked about powdered milk, you know, but I moved on up. I know the feeling, and it can come with some heavy feelings too. Love this. An important takeaway, that it's important not to make assumptions about what other people's money stories are based on the spaces we move through now. Yes, yes. The confusing feelings of guilt that come with making money and not being poor anymore. I'm still struggling with that myself personally. Like, what do I do with all this money? Oh, I have to save it and give it to people who need it. Yes. Thank you all so much for sharing. Thank you all for having these conversations and getting vulnerable with folks that you may not even know. That's a big deal. And like, I know how that feels, and I am very proud of all of us today doing that. One other question we would like to pose to y'all in the chat: what do you want to learn from other people about how and why they give? And who do you want to learn from? You know, we've talked about family a lot here, and I think that's really interesting. I think I would, now as an adult, I feel like I could go back and have some of these conversations with family members about their methods of giving. What else? Oh, yes. Yeah, that's, Kelsey and I talked a lot about feeling bad about when we're taking care of ourselves or doing something nice for ourselves with money, right? Because that's another thing that comes up. Well, once again, I'd just like to applaud all of you for having these conversations, for taking that first step, and yeah, making sure you're having that in the forefront of your mind before you're having these conversations, and not making any assumptions about someone's situation, because you don't know. Even if it seems like they have a lot of money, you don't know if they have $100,000 in student loans. You don't know. You don't know if they're taking care of family back in another place. You don't know. Don't make assumptions, right? But with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to my lovely co-facilitator, Sasha.
Thanks so much. And thank you again, everyone, for, like I said in the chat, we threw you into the deep end. We said, try this out, have this conversation, and not just like, what is money in the world and what do I give, but where do I come from as a person, and what does that mean, and how does that inform my journey, which is one of the hardest ways to do this, right? So I'm really grateful for you all for taking that on, and to think about, right, if you were able to do this in this small, great breakout room, how else can you do this, and how else can you use this experience to inform how you approach people, how you approach your giving circle, how you approach your giving work. So I'm going to share my screen again. And we're going to go back into a slightly heady space, but I want you to use your conversations to inform how we're thinking about concretely how we talk about money, when it's useful, what to do about it. So at Amplifier, we've thought a lot about how to support people to start conversations about money, about how and why they give, and how that informs their giving moving forward, right? How we can invite people into the practice of giving with us. And so we've come up with some tips based on the conversations we've had in the communities we've worked with. The first of which is that you have to commit to having the conversation and inviting other people to join, right? Like, that's part one. I'm going to do this. This is important. It matters to me. And I'm going to invite others. Here's who I'm going to invite. And that you root that invitation and the conversation in your relationship, right? You know what that baggage might be. You remember how you felt during this conversation we just had, or at the beginning during the meditation, and realize both that other people are coming with similar anxiety and with other things, right? Like, we can suppose that they're coming with some similar concerns, but also we might not know what people are bringing to the conversation. So certainly ground in relationship. And I see some great things coming into the chat. So if somebody wants to like highlight them for me while I'm talking, I'm not going to be able to read them super closely. One of the things that we've learned in these conversations is the point here is not agreement, right? It's not like we all agree on everything. We're not going to do that. It's connection, right? How can I see you and what's important to you, and where are there similarities there? Where can I say, yes, that's important to me too? Not necessarily agree on everything. And that when you structure the conversation, everyone needs to be able to share and everyone needs to be able to listen to each other to learn. You can read the slide yourself, but one of the things that I also want to pull out, right, is that we start with something universal like values. And at Amplifier, we're always doing Jewish values, but I invite you to think about what values is everyone around the table going to say, oh yeah, of course I believe in hope and helping the stranger and a loving kindness, right? But then start with that universal piece and then get specific. What does that actually look like to you concretely in practice? Which organizations are moving that work forward in the world? What does that look like? What does that mean? How do I support that? And then create an actionable goal for your giving. And you can do that on your own or with the other folks around the table. And for those of y'all here in giving circles, we suggest that you do this either as a tool for like an early meeting, for community building, to explore whether a giving circle is a right fit for your family, for your friends, as a skill building practice, right? This is a really good tool to practice inviting people into donating or having the conversation about money. And potentially to share what giving circles are with friends and family who don't get it, right? People are like, what do you mean you sit with people and you talk about giving money, right? And you can say, it's actually not that hard. Let me model a conversation for you right now or next week. And suddenly it's so much more accessible that you can actually have deep, meaningful, facilitated conversations with people. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left and I want to make sure we give you some tools. So Kelsey is going to drop some links in the chat. This link is a toolkit and I invite you to open it and check it out with a number of resources. One of them we developed at Amplifier. I'll show you that one quickly. This is specifically for family conversations about giving. And it's rooted in Jewish values, but like, if anyone wants to know, we can give you tips on adjusting it, but it starts from like the safe and heady, where'd you learn about giving? Which of these quotes resonate with you? To telling real stories about what values mean to you and what impact you actually want to have, right? What that looks like concretely, and it invites you to give. So that's just one example. And I will say, use your experience here to inform how you invite people to the conversation, right? If you've never had this conversation, maybe you start with like a self-exploration tool. If this is something that like you really want to do this with your family, but this is always a screaming match, maybe invite an outside facilitator. And for those asking, I'll share my website in a minute, but I'm actually going to pass it to Kelsey to talk a bit more about the toolkit that they just put in the chat. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to close out this session. Thank you all so much for putting your trust in us and being vulnerable. And I'm sorry that you can hear my screechy chair, and you might also be able to hear the garbage truck outside my house. But specifically this tool that we created, these resources, I know it can be a little bit overwhelming, but just know that you can engage with it at your own pace. We collected all of our little tips and tricks right at the top. We separated specifically for giving circles what you can consider. And then from there, just a few brief pieces about what we pulled. Ride Free Fearless Money is run by an amazing woman named Hassan Damian. I am obsessed with her. Former punk who used to avoid taxes at all costs, turned financial advisor. So for those of you looking for financial advising, I don't think she takes on individual clients, but she has an amazing slew of worksheets. So, things like resilient giving plans, workbooks to talk about money. Her whole blog is honestly amazing. And she has a podcast that I'd highly recommend. The next big one that we recommend is Decolonizing Wealth, specifically their Money as Medicine Toolkit. It's a great journaling exercise, good for that internal work, but also good to share with your giving circle or your community and start those conversations together. I also would recommend the overall book for those of you who are like philanthropy heads and in the field. You have to read Decolonizing Wealth. It is essential reading for those of you in this field. And then the next major one is the resources created by the Social Justice Fund Northwest and the Coalition of Anti-Racist Whites. I really love Social Justice Fund Northwest. They have amazing webinars around donor organizing, money stories, and they actually have an upcoming event specifically geared towards BIPOC identifying individuals around giving. So even if you're on the East Coast like I am, sign up for those webinars, get those recordings, get these resources. They're truly amazing. And then again, we're highlighting the Family Conversation Toolkit, which Sasha already spoke about. And in the bottom half, we have resources for just generally exploring class. So this can be, you know, understanding what is class privilege, things like that. I also highlighted Ride Free Fearless Money's slide scale chart. One thing I want to note, the chart is messy. Y'all are going to open it up and you're going to be like, oh my God, this looks like so much. Why did you recommend this? It is designed specifically for business owners who want to do sliding scale, but the reason why I use it all the time is because it helps folks think about class in an expansive way, right? Not only do you have student loans, right? But did you get to go to college? Was your college paid for? What does it mean for you to have student loans, but have, you know, an upper level degree? I have student loans, but I also have a master's degree in public policy, which potentially means something different than one of my peers who wasn't able to finish college and has those student loans still, versus a friend who never had access to college to begin with. So don't get intimidated. Just, again, take it all at your own pace. And then the final piece, I just have to give big shout outs to Justice Funders because I love their work. Their work partnered with East Bay Community Foundation, the Learning and Leading Together Reflections on the inaugural donor leadership cohort. It's just a really great read for why these conversations are important and how they can be inspiring. And so with that, I want to thank all of you for coming on this journey with us. I want to thank Maritza. I want to thank Sasha. I want to thank our tech team. Please, 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 on behalf of We Give Summit and PHT, stick around for a poll that you'll see pop up. It's very quick, 2 questions. You've probably already seen these questions before. And then join us at the top of the hour for our next session, Run Toward, Not Fun From Change. And if you have any questions for us, please reach out on Whova. We have loved planning this session with y'all, and we hope you enjoy the rest of We Give Summit.
Thank you all so much.